كحاتكم دفا جينا نرزق الحربي اللي دبيت مساقي على الرجال مسجدين عامل وردين
What's up everyone? Salam salam. أنا مرزا لكم ياو تخاطرت ناي سايبر باور تجراي ميديا لعنتي خلت جايش أمس إركم الله هي بإنجليزية أنا مجمع تخناتو تاو تملسنا نا تجرينا خنعات وينا برنامجنا أكايدانا ياو ني يوناس فلتو يمن البات بالسوشيال ميديا هاد موزعت الجاي زكالة زلو ياو زعدي أنحيو جن تولدين أي اعتراض اللي يو أنا كم تفوتوا هم لمداي بتشوم بتملك تجرايون كاوي كم تفوت أركو هاوي كم زمس أهو يردوكم يو سأجاي بميديا وني مسنير يو ناي تجراي ديزاينر كوينو بزح نجارات ناي السلامة وسلفتات تقدن وخداونتي بانديراتات بزح نجار ناصر حدث أنحيو قدم حيزون بسايبر وسينير يو سلازيو دسكشننا نعم قدرنا نمتاونا تماجايشنا تي أكايدانا نتايو زعما قداي تجراي مس إرترا نقصار زمس زلو بتعمي زفرح زلو حيال كويناتاتنا أو ساعات زلو كوينات كما جرنا تهزبنا سلام فترة خوينو كما جرنا بحد خنسرح لنا تسأل أي خمنيو نتسأل أي خنات فنت خوينا جن ناتناسب معتنا ناتردأنا الناسنا كما جرنا فتحاوي كنسرحنا أيتي علامنا so hopefully you guys both understood what I just described, hopefully, in Tigrayans. So we're going to go back to... All right. Thank you. So, Johannes, so I've never met you in person, but in the chat, you know, that we are part of, we meaning I would call it a responsible and matured Tigrayans and Eritreans, or Eritrean Americans and Tigrayan Americans, that we came together, or at least to an extent that we have been working together to challenge or report those who directly have shown hate speech towards people back home in Tigray and Eritrea, in Ethiopia, and whatnot. The focus, obviously, in the group is being, again, on hate speech. Anyone who is, giving hate speech on social media, tweeting, we've been after them. We mean in the group within the chat and Messenger. If I'm not mistaken, and if you don't mind me mentioning this, I think you've been working with Dawit, Captain Eritrea, kind of helping out or whatnot. I know that I don't know if you came, but the protest we had in Los Angeles, like last April, it was actually...
I was there.
So okay, perfect. I apologize. Maybe I forgot, but so there was about 5 or 6 Tigrayans and another 5 or so Eritreans that we actually worked together to organize that. And I was part of that, organizing that event, which I believe we had a little over 300, if not more, Eritreans, and they came from New York, from Massachusetts, Florida, San Diego. We had a larger pocket, Seattle. Of course, I'm going to get myself in trouble because there was a host of other cities that I personally had the opportunity to meet with them. Why I'm saying this is, bottom line is, look, we have a major issue back home, meaning in Tigray for the last 15 months, atrocity took place, genocide that the West is failed to declare because they know the financial responsibilities and the actions that they need to take. We know we have a regime in Eritrea that had oppressed the people in Eritrea for the past 30 years, and the people of Eritrea fought 30 years prior to that. So for the past 60 years, Eritrea has been simply nothing other than one man. Well, the last 30 years under Isaias Afwerki, the military training, what we kind of briefly touched bases in the backstage when the three of us were talking about. So there's a host of other problems: the history, the cause, what's going on, what have happened, and how the division and the hate has been built up, leading to what's happening now in Tigray, which we all know. Tigray was attacked by Hagdef or Shabia or Eritrean military led by Isaias Afwerki, the Amhara Fana, Amhara militia, the rest of the Ethiopian federal troops, less the Tigrayan troops who were also rounded up, and 17, 25,000 of them, we don't know where they're at. We also now know that 10,000 Somalian troops that were trained in Eritrea were brought into Tigray to fight, and many of them had, in fact, committed atrocities such as killing priests and nuns at churches, including rapes and burning down churches in Tigray. Those are the reports that we've been told 3,000. Now it's been modified to 10,000, but we don't even know the actual number. But the point here is the number of military that has been involved in Tigray. We know that Abiy Ahmed called it law and order operation. It's supposed to end within a few weeks. 15 months later, Tigray is still closed off from the rest of the world. There's no media. There's no internet. There is literally recently, if you follow most of the hospitals in Tigray have run out of medicine. Many of the hospitals, 80% of them have been looted. So given the context of everything that I say, I guess I don't know if it's a question, but it's more, I'd like you to introduce yourself first and foremost. I'd like you to, kind of to let the audience know why are you fighting the way you're fighting, and what are the things that we need to do, we, meaning you, myself, the young diaspora, to close the gap, bring the people of Eritrea and Tigray together to defeat the common enemy and to bring lasting peace, that so the people of Tigray and the people of Eritrea can live side by side as neighbors.
Okay, thanks, brother. So a quick introduction. My name is Jonas Waldo. I'm an advocate. I work with the Global Diplomacy Department and as well as Team Freedom. And we're advocating daily. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of stuff to unpack from what you said. The main thing we have to understand is we have to advocate for any type of against any type of injustice that we see. That's the main thing. And then when we do that, the benefit of that, what we see now won't escalate. It won't escalate to what we see now. Because for people to be oppressed for 30 years and so forth, that's just an example of injustice. And so that's something that needs to be advocated against right away. And then in terms of what can we do right now with the war going on, is we have to collectively advocate like we've been doing to turn the power back on, to get food and aid to where it needs to the victims of the war, including all in Tigray and also all around the whole Ethiopia, all the victims of the war. And then also the drone attacks. That has to stop. There should be drones attacking daily in any part of the country. And so these are the things that we can get behind and advocate for. Then the other thing is education. Education is a huge part of it. Understanding what the dynamics are, what people are experiencing, understanding people's grievances and so forth. That's pretty much important, because apparently history shows that there's always constant fighting. So we have to resolve this by understanding one another. And so one thing that doesn't change is principles, virtues, positive principles of love, principles of respect. These principles don't change. And so what we have to do is behave in a way that gravitates towards that. So as a diaspora, we have the responsibility to be an example of this, because diaspora life and local life is two different things, two completely different things. But the virtues are the same. The virtue of respect, love, kindness, all those are the same. The listening, understanding, all are the same. But so that's the biggest thing. I hope that can answer to your question. But yeah, we have to keep being advocates, and also we have to be good listeners and create an understanding of one another, and do it collectively together for the same aim. Because in my opinion, our true enemy is always going to be injustice. No matter what name you put behind it, you can put Aforki behind it, you can put Abi behind it, you can put any name you want behind it. But the key is their behavior of creating injustice and oppression is the enemy. So if we can surround ourselves by that, then we're always going to be in solidarity, and we're also always going to benefit the society, the people, by doing that. Does that make sense, Mickey?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, the very first comment from a fellow Tigrayan American or Tigrayan is that it's ridiculous to believe that Tigrayan and Eritrean can work together after all the bloodshed caused by the regime of Asmara. I think they're referring to Isaias Afwerki. I honestly feel the war with Eritrea will only end if the lazy people of Eritrea rise up and say no more to bloodshed, to the evil one regime. Otherwise, it is a waste of time. So let me just kind of like keep you on this. So this is the kind of thing what we're trying to discuss here is like, okay, there's frustration versus reality check. We're at a point where 95,000 Eritrean refugees that was housed in Tigray, we don't know what happened to them. 2.8 million Tigrayans have been displaced internally. 75 to 80,000 Tigrayans are in Sudan as refugees. And I was there last summer. Actually, I visited them myself personally. And the list goes on and on. Internally, 900,000 Tigrayans are a famine-like condition. About 92% of the population in Tigray needs some kind of assistance, whether it be food, medicine, what have you. So when you kind of see this kind of tone, this kind of frustration, which what that is that how do we, we tone this down? How do we really first understand from, I don't want to really put you on a corner, but from someone in the Eritrean side, okay, so I've talked about 30 years of oppression in Eritrea, right? So if you have 30 years of oppression in Eritrea, and yet the Tigrayans are now saying that, I am saying included with them, that what happened in Tigray is something that there are no words to explain and to express the pain and suffering. For 15 months, for example, I have not spoken to any of my family members in Tigray. I don't even know how many of them are alive or dead. So, and that's not just my story. So when you have this kind of, anger, which is, it fits the narrative of Isaias, Abiy Ahmed, and we can go on and on, right? But how do we really, educate people to understand that the root cause of the problem? Then once we do that, we would then have to work on the rebuilding process. And of course, also you have the trauma, the looting, the theft, so many things that happened, including when the Eritrean military looted and took everything that they can take from Tigray. Priests in Eritrea told the communities to not buy anything that was stolen from Tigray. I mean, and to some degree, that's embarrassing for any reasonable human being, whether you're Eritrean or not, to see these kind of events unfold to people actually that you look alike, you speak the same language for the most part. That is, I mean, if you're in the border of Tigray and Eritrea, you look at people, there's intermarriages, but the language, the appearance. So how do we turn so evil to people in the way that have happened in Tigray?
Okay, so the first thing I could say to, I think it was Desta Kasai.
Yeah.
The first thing is this: acknowledge it. Acknowledge what's happening. So I acknowledge any person who's facing any kind of atrocity, any kind of genocide. Acknowledge that it's happening. Then second, acknowledge that the people that are working together are already working together. And so for him to say he doesn't believe it doesn't make any sense, because it's already happening. Eritreans and Tigrayans are already working together. That's number two. Then the third is focus on what you can do. Never mind what you can't imagine or can't believe. Just focus on what you can do. If each individual focuses on what they can do, and for example, you can read on some things, you can speak to some people, you can advocate for the end of the war. You can advocate for food and aid. You can do that collectively. So if we focus on what we can do, then we'll watch the movement, the change happen as it happens, because Eritreans, even back in the day, they've already started working with Tigray a long time ago, and then that came before this war even started. So that's the key thing you got to understand. Now, as far as everything else, it is going to come down to accountability. It is going to come down to the end in the war for anything to become better. It's hard to try to change the mind of anybody who's been traumatized or victimized, for that matter. So I just pray that they meet an Eritrean one day that they can respect and that they can work together with one day. But at the end of the day, accountability is what it's going to come down to, and it's not a whole nation that's going to be held accountable. It's the governing body that's being held accountable, and the individuals who actually did the crime. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, guys, sorry. I think I don't know if it's internet connectivity, but I'm hearing a little bit glitches. But okay, so you're back. So so before we went live, you sort of like touch bases on the tactics used or the history in Eritrea, why led to what's happening today. Do you want to kind of touch bases on that, and then we'll come back to the discussion?
Sure.
Keep in mind that we're going to shift into Tigrayans eventually, hopefully, but there's a lot to unpack, and I just don't want to like layer up like question after question. But maybe you can enlighten our audience the short version of the history that you were telling us, like how far back it goes, what went wrong, and where we are today.
Yeah, I think as Jonas has said, education is the key here, because if we look back, the people they live in that area, the Eritreans and the Tagaro, they have a lot of history that they could be proud of it, but it been destroyed by invaders. So they kind of brainwash the people in a way that in a point that we don't like each other anymore. And when Shabia go to the Sahel area, they just push more into that what Italy has left. And when they come to Asmara, they just have done even more, even worse. And not only that, during the war, I think Jonas has more knowledge on that, but on the 84, when the famine in Tigray happened.
1984.
Yeah, in 1984. Okay. The Eritrean, there were freedom fighters that time. They block the way for the hunger Tagaro people try to move to Sudan, and that's kind of starting from there and roll off all the way to coming to like the Mengistu give the power, the collapse of the Russia Federation, and when they get the independent, it was, I think, a lot of people can witness. Maybe I was young, but a lot of witness that it was really good. The 7 years between the Mengistu to the Badme war, it was really, really good. Like business-wise, all that. A lot of people can witness that. And then what happened was, I think again, I don't have a lot of knowledge on this, but the Burma war broke out, even though there is a lot of issue behind that. So when I'm from Tigray, when I speak from on the side of Tagaro, that's the Eritrean government that wants the Nakfa equal to the Bur, which is impossible. So there is a currency issue. and there was a power issue, and there was like hungry of power to lead the East Africa. Maybe the Eritreans could have their own idea, but that's what I've been learning. And then when the
Yeah.
Badman, yeah. So
No, I was gonna
this
say
is,
I like what you're saying, and here's the thing.
yeah.
I like what you're saying. Here's the thing. I think we do need to have like a truth and reconciliation over the '98 war.
Yeah.
And that's an example of a solidarity, understanding. I mean, I would take it to another level. And once there's a truth and reconciliation, for there to be institutions. And once, I mean, obviously, I'm speaking after this war is over and PFDJ is gone, and we have democracy all over. But my point is, we have to find a way to take these events, this historical events that happened in the past,
Yeah.
and then use it for lessons and education and create a truth and reconciliation about it. It's not, these events are not designed for us to argue about. These events are designed for us to learn from, because we don't want to repeat these events. These events is part of our history, and we are the survivors of the events. We're here because of whatever we did in the past. We're here. And so because of that, it's our responsibility to end this genocide that's going on, end this war that's going on, and end all the injustice that's going on in the entire region.
Yeah. So this is the issue, the history behind the rollover and come to today. And like what is happening now is, it's not just the last 15 months. That's what I'm trying to say. It just been carried from centuries. I mean, almost 100 years. You know, from a separation of saying Agame and Hamasian, and from a separation of I am better, that at least I was a slave of white man, and I'm not a better, at least I was a slave of a black man, which is Menelik. So that was the separation. But before that, there was no separation. We can read a lot of books, a lot of histories, but unfortunately, you know, Italy didn't take the whole Tigrinya speakers, or Menelik didn't take the whole Tigrinya speakers. So division been created there. But this division, those leaders, instead of they make they close it, they create a lot of gap. They create, now it's for generations, because Eritrean soldiers come to, not in the border Badme or in Zalambasa, but Aksum, Makala. They have nothing to do there. So we have to somehow cut off. Now it's getting even worse, from saying Agame and Hamasian, and into blocking hunger people going to Sudan, into Badme war, now into come to Aksum and doing a genocide. What is next? It's going more.
And this is why we stand up for injustice.
Yeah.
So there was a lot, you know, I was holding myself to not interrupt you guys, and I was like taking little notes. So we talk about the 1984 famine. We talked about the 1998 war. So let me do backward. In 1998, 2000, the 2-year war between Ethiopia and Eritrea and Badme and other areas, obviously, I want to mention that roughly or estimated 80,000 fighters have died in that war. 80,000 estimated. That's 80,000 people. And it went like, even in currency, that's a lot. So people don't even talk about that. People don't even remember that. Okay. So that's just, I just want to throw that out there to people, what war does to us. When there's a war, no matter who wins at the end, the number of people that die at war, and nobody even knows how many Ethiopians, how many Eritreans lost their limbs, how many of them are permanently disabled or mentally, emotionally, physically traumatized from that war. But the people who died at war is estimated at 80,000. Okay, that's in 1998, 2000, a 2-year war that was fought in Badame and that area over a border dispute. Okay, then we go back to 1984, and I want to like kind of, Jonas, if you don't mind, emphasizing the 1980 famine took place, and in Eritrea there was a blockage from refugees from Ethiopia or Tigray crossing into Sudan, and the border where you cross from Hamara to Ibn Hajar is the area, obviously, that leads you into Kasela. That was blocked off. And what was really interesting in talking to you before the show actually was you separated the EPLF and the ELF. I'm going to leave that to you. So could you kind of briefly talk about that, kind of like what you were covering earlier, because some of these things we want to cover them when we go to the next segment. People need to understand, we always just say like, Eritreans, but separating within the Eritrean movement, even yourself, like working with Yakin, with Team Freedom. Most people. Go ahead.
So we had a room in Clubhouse. Team Freedom hosted a room, and we had it was a Jebha room, and we gave the history of Jebha, which is ELF. We gave the history of them, and in the process, what we explained to people, there was a civil war with EPLF and ELF, and then also TPLF was also a partner to EPLF at the time. And so what happened was they fought, and then ELF pretty much left the country because of the war. So they left the country. They went to Sudan. And so when you mentioned this blockade in Sudan and the blockade in Tigray in 1984 and so forth, the force that was in Eritrea at that time was EPLF, right? And so so that blockade happened during their time, and then fast forward to Eritrea, the dynamics of it. It's a diverse nation. It's not just one ethnicity, as you guys know. And so we have lowlanders and highlanders and so forth. And you have Tigray speaking, Afar speaking, Kunama, and you have Blin. All these linguistic ethnicities by language. And so when you have this, that's what makes it more complicated than just thinking it's just Tigrinya. It's not. And so that's one thing, aspect to understand about it. But what doesn't change is the principles of respecting your neighbor, the principles of no oppression, the principles of justice. These are the things that we have to gravitate towards. And the 30 years of oppression in Eritrea doesn't mean that there wasn't resistance. There's been resistance. The issue is people are being arrested and detained and so forth. That's the reality of the situation. There was events in 2013. There was a protest throughout the decades and so forth. They'll just get shot up and so forth. And so that's the reality of the situation. I think what were you asking me earlier? So back to the famine situation. So we have to understand a lot of people are hurt in Tigray right now. And so when they generalize Eritrean, it's natural. The generalization is natural, right? But the reality is, just like in Tigray, there's TPLF, and then there's the people of Tigray, right? There's TDF, and then there's the people of Tigray. So everything is an entity. Everything is there's civilians. So for example, when the sanctions happened in Eritrea, the people didn't get sanctioned. EDF got sanctioned. PFDJ got sanctioned. The entities specifically got sanctioned, right? The reason is because they're involved in the war in Tigray. They shouldn't be involved in the war in Tigray. And so it's important that we educate people not to generalize. That's the main thing. And then I think somebody left a comment in here, which I really liked, about truth and reconciliation. They said similar discussions should happen between Tagadu and Amhara intellectuals, discussion of truth and reconciliation. And the reality is, we all need it. But the main thing we have to end right now is the war, because it's hard to have a conversation with somebody when there's an active war going on. You know what I mean? But so I hope I answered your question. I went off to the tangent at the same time, so sorry about that.
No, you're good. No, totally. And so, and on February 20th, there will be a discussion that that I'll be hosting that will be involved an activist from the Amhara community, an activist from the Harar community / Oromia, and Danny, who is an activist, fellow Tigrayan, of course. We plan to have a lengthy discussion on February 20. We've been sharing that on social media and whatnot. Yes, I think, at the end of the day, as much as that we have emphasized the Amhara elite, the Fana, the Hegdef led by Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea have destroyed anything and everything possible when they send troops to Tigray, and the anger, the pain that has left on our people in Tigray, it is, I had people from yesterday's discussion. I was telling you guys, it was somewhat heated discussion I had. I was trying to really, as a fellow Tigrayans, I was like, hey, we gotta, emotion aside, we gotta separate the people of Eritrea from the dictator in Eritrea. And I was even getting some nasty text messages and messenger messages from my fellow Tigrayans saying what happened to you? Why are you supporting Eritreans? No, what I'm supporting is a lasting peace where I want less Tagar to die. I want less of the death and more of the focus and emphasis bringing a lasting solution to the problem. And the more we are angry, the more this war goes on, more Tagar die. So I told myself that we're going to switch into Tigrinya, 30 to 35 minutes of the conversation. Before we switch, if you guys want to take a couple minutes English, if not, it's 32 into the conversation, 32 minutes. Are you guys okay switching into Tigrinya? Johannes, I haven't talked to you before, so I don't know if you're comfortable in Tigrayna. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm better at listening to it, but I'll try to because that'll be good. Mr. Hash for me.
You're good. You're good. And feel free to switch it to English. It's totally fine. I'm not worried about it. So thank you guys. It's a guy. I know ቅድሚ ሕዚ መፅኻ ኢኻ ናብዚ ትግርኛ ንክናትሂዚ እቲ ናይ ህዝብና ስምዒት ንደት ያው ደጋጊምና እንተ ገለጽናዮ ትርጉም የብሉን ይርዳእና እዩ ህዝብና ኣሕዋትና ተደፊረን ብዙሕ ፀገማት መፅዩ ኣብ ሰዓት እዚ ግን እቲ ናይ ሰራዊት ሕግደፍ ብዓፋር ብተፈላለዩ ቦታት ብባድመ ብራማ ብሽረ ብማኒኻ ብዙሕ ቦታት anyway ሑመራ ንባዕሉ ሒዝዎ እዩ ኒስትል ሒዚ ሓያል ውግእ ኣብ ናይ ዓፋር ክልላት እንሄ እዩ ቅድሚ ሒዚ እውን ተማረኹ ድዮም ዝሞቱ ናይ ኢትዮጵያ ዩኒፎርም ገይሮም ኤርትራውያን ናይ ኤርትራ መታወቂያ ዘለዎም ተረጋገፁሉ መገድታት ተረኺቡ እዚያት ኩሉ ሓፈሻዊ ግን ክሪኦ እንተለና ንሕና እውን TDF ዋላ ሽኒፉ ክርኢ እንተለና ንኸስር ኣለና ኢና ሓፈሻዊ ህዝብና ሞት እዩ ዘሎ ኣብ ጥሜት እዩ ዘሎ ብዙሕ መከራ እንሄ ስለዚ እዚ ንሕና ኣግፊሕና ክሪኦን ከለና ፍትሓዊ እንታይ ንግበረሉ እዩ ናብዚ ዲስከሽን ዘምፀናኒ ምክንያቱ ወርሕን ዓመትን 3 ወርሕን ዝገበረ ቃልሲ ሒዚ እንተኾነ ሒዚ ህዝብና ይመውት እዩ ዘሎ ሶ ኣይንዛረብን ምስ ኤርትራውያን ፍትሓዊ ብቅልፅምና ብሓይልና እምበር ብካሊእ መፍትሒ የብሉን እናበልና ግን ህዝብና እንታይ ዓይነት ክሳራ ይኸስር ከም ዘሎ ንሪኦ ኣለና ስለዚ እዚያት ክንሓስበሉ እንተለና ከመይ ጌርና ኢና ፍትሓዊ መገዲ ምስቶም ድልየት ዘለዎም ኤርትራውያን ንሰላም ፍትሒ ክፍታሕ ኢሎም ዝኣምኑ ምስኦም ከመይ ጌርና ንምንታይ ኢና ሓደ ክንቃለሰሉ ቃልስና ክነጋፍዖ ዘይንኽእል ካልኣይ ቃልስና እንድሕር ዘጋፊዕና ኢኻ ከመይ ጌርና ክነጋፍዖ ለልካ ትግምት ወይ ቃናትካ ሓሳብ እንታይ እዩ
ወል መጀመርያ ክንገብሮ ዘለና ትግራይ ኣብ ፀበባ እንድያ ዘላ ሕዚ ኩሉ ሰብ ኩሉ ዓለም ኣብ kind of ክሕደት እዩ ዝስምዐኒ ምክንያቱ ሕብረተሰብና ኣብኡ ዘሎ ይጠሚ መድሓኒት ይስእን እቲ ጥይት ተሸኪሙ ዝዘውር ዘሎ ጥራሕ ኣይኮነን ዝመውት ዘሎ ዋላ እቶም ቆልዑ ህፃውንቲ እቶም ኣረግቶት ሰብኡት ተን ኣረግቶት ኣንስቲ መድኃኒት ሲኢነን ደቀን እንዳጥሓኒት እኽሊ ዘውፅሕለን ሲኢነን ናብ ምግዳል ከይዶም በቃ ዝሆል ፒፕል እዩ ኣብ ሽግር ዘሎ ኩሉ እዩ ኣብ ሞት ዘሎ ኩሉና ክንውዳእ እውን ዳርጋ ዝሓስቡ ዘሎ እዩ ዝመስል ሶ እቲ ዘለና ኣማራጭ ድምፅና ምንቲ ብዙሕ ክብል ነቶም ደገፍትና ዝኾኑ ኤርትራውያን ደገፍትና ዝኾኑ ኦሮሞ ደገፍትና ዝኾነ ኩሉ ሰብ ብዛዕባ ሰብ ዝቆርቆር ዋላ የመናዊ ይኹን ዋላ ኣፍጋኒስታናዊ ይኹን ብዛዕባ ሰብ ዝጭናቕ ብዛዕባና ኩሉ ግዜ ብዝኸድናዮ እንዳተዛረብና እቶም ኤርትራውያን እውን ስፔሻሊ እቶም ናባና ዝቐርቡ እቲ ፔንና ይርድኦም እዩ ንሶም እውን ከማና ኮይኖም ኣምባሳደራት ክኾኑ ይኽእሉ እዮም ዝብል ሓሳብ ኣለኒ እና ብዝኸድናዮ ባስ ብዝኸድናዮ ኤርፖርት ምዝራብ ካብኡ እቶም ፍሉጣት ዝበሉ ናይ ስቴት ሓለፍቲ በቃ ምዝራእ ካሊእ ኦፕሽን ስለ ዘይብልና እዩ ካሊእ ኦፕሽን ተዝገበርናዮ እንዲና ክንገብር ግን ሕዚ ተዘሓኢሉ ኣሎ ስፔሻሊ ካብ ኦፕሬሽን ኣሉላ እንድሕር ብጣዕሚ ተዘሓኢሉ ብዙሕ ኣይንወፅን ዘለና ይርደን እዩ ኢኮኖሚካሊ ዋላ ክጉዱ ይኽእሉ እዮም ካብ ቦታ ናብ ቦታ ንቀሳቀሱ ምናምን ግን እቲ መጀመርያ ክንቀሳቀስ ከለና ንዓለም መስሚዕና ኢና ብጣዕሚ እሱ ክንቅፅለሉ ኣለና እሱ ምስ ንቅፅለሉ እዩ ዓለም ዝሰምዐና ዓለም ክሰምዐና ክንገብር ኣለና ሶሉሽን ክመፅእ ክእል ኣለዎ ምክንያቱ ከም ዝበልኳ እዩ ህዝቢ ከም ህዝቢ ንሕና ምስቲ ዝጋደል ዘሎ ነቲ ዝጋደል ዘሎ ሓግዙና ይበልና እቲ ዝጋደል ዘሎ ዓርሱ ክኽእል እዩ ትሬኒንግ ተገይሩ እዩ ዓርሱ ክኽእል እዩ ባዕሉ ጎይ እዩ ባዕሉ ፀላቱ ክሃድን እዩ ግን እቲ ሲቪል ሕብረተሰብ ብፀላእቲ ተኸቢቡ ክጠሚ ክሓምም ዝግበር ዘሎ ግን ዓለም ሙሉእ ክፈልጥ እንተደልዮም ብኤርድሮፕ ድዮም ክገብሩ እንተደልዮም ኣገዲዶም ድዮም ወይ ብሑመራ ወይ ብዓፋር በቃ ሓንቲ መንገዲ ድዮም ክኸፍቱ ብዘየግድስ ነቲ ህዝቢ ግን ክርእይዎ ምክንያቱ ፓርት ኦፍ ናይቲ ዓለም ስለ ዝኾና ክንጠፍእ ተፈሪድና ኣለና እናቶም ፀላእቲ ጥራሕ ኣይኮኑን ከጥፉና ደልዮም ኣለዉ ምክንያቱ ሶሻል ኣብዚ ኢንተርኔት ወርልድ ሲ ዘይፈልጥ ኣሎ ኢልካ ንምሕሳብ ዝከቢድ እዩ ብጣዕሚ ዘይፈልጥ ኣሎ እንድሕር ኢልና ብጣዕሚ ጌጋ እዩ ጀስ ኢግኖር እዩ ተገይሩ ዘሎ ሶ ሕዚ ኣሜሪካውያን ወላቶም ካልኦት ኤውሮፓውያን 120 ሚልዮን ህዝቢ ናይ ኢትዮጵያ ስደት ከይመፅኦም ፈሪዖም ንዓና በቃ መስዋእቲ ኮኑ ኢትዮጵያ ንከይትፈርስ ዝዓይነቱ ተፈሪድና ኢና ዘለናና እዚ ዝቆርቆሮም ኤርትራውያን እዚ ዝቆርቆሮ ካሊእ ኦሮሞ ካሊእ ማሕበረሰብ ኣሰባሲብና ክንዛረብ ኣለና ንዓለም ከምታ ናይ መጀመርያ ከባቢ ዝነበረት ናብ ከምኡ ክንምለስ ኣለና ተዚ ኮይኑ ማለት ብሸሞንተ ዓይነት ጥይት ኢኻ ትውጋእ ዘላ ሓደ ብጥይት ይቐለካ ኣሎ ብጥሜት ይቐለካ ኣሎ ብሕማም ይቐትለካ ኣሎ ብብዙሕ ዓይነት ሞት ኢኻ ትመውት ዘላ ሶ ነዚ እውይ ተዘይልና መፍትሒ ስለዘይብሉ ማለት ሪናያ ኢና ኢቨን ዶ ኣብ መሬትና ኮይኖም ሰብ ይጭፍጭፉ ገለመለ ዋላ ተነበሩ ግን ኣትሊስት ይስማዕ ነይሩ ብዛዕባና ይዘረብ ነይሩ ብዛዕባና
እዋ ግን ሶሪ ከቋርፀልካ ከነ እታ ዲስካሽንና ክትጥዕመልና ምንታ ተነ ነጥብና ይንረስዕ እታ ናብታ ሽሙኻቱ ናብ ክልል ዝኾነት እተኻቱ ፍትሓዊ ንክንገብር ምስ ኤርትራ እንታይ ቃልሲ ዘድልየና እንታይ ዓይነት ስራሕ ኢና ንሰርሕ ዘለና
ኦኬ ምስ ኤርትራውያን እቶም ኦልሬዲ ዝስዑና ዘለዉ ንዖም እንዳተኸተልና ኤዱኬሽን እታ ዮናስ ዘላያኩ ኤዱኬሽን በቃ
ግን ኣይትረስዕ ብእንግሊዝኛ ስለ ዝበላ ብትግርኛ ኢና ንገብራ ዘለና ሒዝኩም
እሺ ኤዱኬሽን ከመይ ትበሃል ብትግርኛ
ትምህርቲ
ምምሃር በቃ ብቐፃልነት ምምሃር ምፍላጥ ክነፍልጦም ምግባር advertise from
Jonas, you muted. Mute خذ
بغصالي خفلتو
مردا إله
مردا
إله
مردا so قصالي مالتي سيلو حدا غزي قال زي كونس قصالي مردا قصالي حزي نحنا بقطع سلون فولتو حدا يرتراو زي فولتو يخل ግን قصال ندحر كونتينيو ندحر نغيرنايو خفولتو سلازغل بقى خمانا سمعو مغار ኤርትራውያን ጥራሕ ዘይኮነስ ቶም ኦሮሞ እውን ይጭፍጨፉ እዮም ዘለዉ ባይዙ እና ምሶም እውን ክንከውን ኣለና ኣጎ ኣለዉ ብዙሓት ኣለዉ ናዮም ኣርስቲ ግን በቃ ክንወፅእ ንክእል ኣለና ከምታ ናይ መጀመርያና ኣብታ ናይ መጀመርያ ዓይነት ሙድ ክንምላስ ኣለና
ፅቡቅ እሞ ኣብቲ መጀመርያ ክትብል ተለኻስ ኣብራርሀይ ኣነ ተሓቶ ነይራ ግን ናብ ዮናስ ክምለስ እየ ዮናስ ሚትኻ ዘለካ ኣንሚት ገበር ሞ ትሕቶታ እዩ ጎቲትዋ ኣሎ እዩ ፀግሽ ወቀሳ ክገብረሉ እየ ፍትሓዊ ሰላም ክፍጠር ተኮይኑ ፍትሓዊ ክንገብር ተኮይና ሞት ክቅነስ ተኮይኑ ኣትኩርና ሒዝናዮ ዘለና ሒዚ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ብዘይ መብት ዘይብሉ ናይ ኣምሓራ ሓይሊ ናይ ኢሳያስ ሓይሊ ናይ ኤርትራ ሓይሊ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ይሃሲ ይቀትል ኣሎ ሒዙ ዋላ እንተኮነ እዚ ጠጠው ንክብል ኣብ ዳያስፖራ ዝነና መጀመርታ ከማኻ ከማይ ያው እቲ እንግሊዝኛ አንተወይለ የንዲ ሒዙ እውን ንሕና ናይ ትግራይ ባክግራውንድና ናይ ትግራይ ኢና ንስኻ ባክግራውንድ ናይ ኤርትራ ነቲ ዲስካሽን ክምችው ትሰውን ክርድኦ እቲ ኣነ እዚ ሎማ ዓንቲ እውን ዝሓተት እኳ እንታዩስ መብዛሕትኡ ግዜ ያው እቲ ትግርኛ ሕይልከ እንተዘይበለ ቅርታ ዝብኢ ኣዛብእ ስለ ዘይተኣማመኑ ጎኒ ጎኒ እዮም ዝኸዱ ምክንያቱ እቲ ሓደ ብቅድሚት ተኸይዱ እቲ ብድሕሪት ዘሎ ነቲ ብቅድሚት ዘሎ ስለ ዝበልዖ ስለዚ እንታይ ክብል እየ ካብ ጎኒ ጎኒ ከም ዝብኢ እናተሓላለኻ ወይ ድማ ዘይተኣማመን እንስሳ ጎኒ ጎኒ ካብ ንኸይድ እቲ ናይ ማሰንጀር ግሩፕ ዘሎ ሄት ስፒች ማለት ንህዝብና ዝጎድእ ንህዝብና ዘንእስ ፀርፍታት ዝፃረፉ ኣብ ሶሻል ሚድያ ዝውዕሉ ኣካውንቶም ብዙሓት ኣዕፂና ኢና ብሓደ ኮይና ማለት እዩ ሶ ትብዛን ኤክስተንት ከምኡ ጌርና እናሰርሕና እንዳሃለና ሓፈሻዊ ግን እቲ ዕብይ ዝበለ ጀነሬሽን ሃትና እዚ ነገር እዚዩ ተረዲእዎ ተቐቢሉ ክድቅስ ኣይከኣለን በተለይ ናይ ትግራይ ህዝቢ ኣነ ብግምት ክዛረብ ኣይደልየን ዛዕባ ኤርትራ ህዝቢ እንታይ ዓይነት ሓሳብ ይገብር ኣሎ እንታይ ዓይነት ኣኼባ ይካየድ ኣሎ ፓርቲስፔት ኣይገብርን እዮም ናይ ኤርትራ ኣኼባ ኣነ ናይ ትግራይ ግን ፓርቲስፔት ይገብር እየ ንባዕለይ እውን ሆስት ይገብር እየ ኣኼባታት ስምዒት ሓያል እዩ ሶ ኣነ እዚ መፅእ ብንኣኻ ክሕሱ ከመሳሰል ተኢለ ትክክል ኣይኮነን ስለዚ እቲ ቴምፐሬቸር ሃይ እዩ ዘሎ ሒዚ እዚ ሪዱስ ጌርና ብሓደ ንክንሰርሕ ሓደ እንታይ እዩ ዘድልየና ብእንግሊዝኛ ገሊፅካ ኢኻ አንተ ካልኣይ ናይ ፀላኢ ትቐንዲ ፀላኢ ኮይኑ ኣብ ኤርትራ ኣብ ኣስመራ ዝኒሄ ፀላኢ ንፀላእ እዝዩ ካብ ዝሕግዝ ንክስረዝ ተኮይኑ ናይ ኤርትራ መናእሰይ ዓለም ሙሉእ ዘለውና ኣብ ውሽጢ ዘለዉ እንታይ እዮም ክሰርሑ ዘለዎም እንታይ እዮም ክቃለሱ ዘለዎም It's a lot to unpack, of course.
Yeah, this one. Haji, I can say it in English again. You can translate for me in Tigrinya. Okay. So I think the first step, Mickey Kanagadeka, the first step is as a diaspora, we're across the whole nation. So I think it's better for people to get involved with the Eritrean community. That's in your city, in your state. There's two Eritrean communities. There's one community that supports that's pro-justice, right? There's another community that probably supports PFDJ. So just recognize that. So get involved with the community that supports that's pro-justice, because that's the community that wants this war to end. Don't worry about, or don't even think about the people who say you can't do this, you can't do that. Even if they're Tagaru, even if they're Oromo, even if they're Amhara, it doesn't matter what they are. Anybody who says you can't create peace, you can't create peace with your neighbors is the problem. or because they're traumatized so much they're not able to see the solution. So the key is to focus on what you can do and work with the people that are willing to work with you to make a collective effort to make things right. That's what we need. And then the other thing is, it's going to come down to recognizing each other's grievances. It's like, for example, what they're talking about in Afar, the civilians are dying. That's a recognition that we have to make. The civilians are dying. And at the same time, we have to recognize that EDF and ENDF and Prosperity Party has a play in it. They're the one who created that chaos. They're the ones, in fact, they're the one who turned off the power in Afar region, just like they turned off the power in Tigray region. So that what it comes down to is we have to work together and recognize the grievances that are happening collectively, because at some point in time there's going to be a truth and reconciliation, and we have to be good with our neighbors. So in this generation, in this diaspora, in this moment, what happened in 1990 is what happened in 1990. What happened in 1980 is what happened in 1980. What's happening in 2022 is what's happened in 2022. So we have to focus on right here. The one thing that has not changed is the principle of respect, the principle of love, the principle of forgiveness, mercy, justice. Those principles hasn't changed. So we have to gravitate towards the principles we want to become. That's what we have to gravitate towards as a people. And then, so by doing that, it's going to take those individual activities, waking up every day, advocating, and getting people in authority and positions to create policies that's going to create what we want. And then hopefully, we also have to cut off the financial support of this war, which is Turkey, UAE, Iran, China, Russia. We have to cut off the financial support, because once we cut off the financial support, then guess what? TDF can finish the job with its aggressors inside the country. Because once TDF has food aid and the aggressors out of the country is gone, and you never know, they might even do a referendum of independence. Once all that happens, then we're going to see true change, and we're going to see a different dynamic in the situation. So we have to cut off the financial support of what's fueling the war. That's the main thing. But as a people, as a society, we just have to work together to gravitate towards the virtues we want to be. Haji, but if you can translate that into Tigraynya, please.
No, you're good. You're good. No, I think ትዝበልካዮ ጽቡቕ እቲ እንታይ ድዩ እቲ ዕላማ I think እቲ ናይ ኤርትራ ሕብረታዊ ብሓደ ንክሰርሕ ናይ ሰላም ዝደሊ ፕሮጀስትስ ማለት ሰላም ዝደሊ ኤርትራዊ ኣብ ዳያስፖራ ዘሎ በብ ዘለዎ ከባቢ ከተማታት ኮነ ስቴት ያው ምስኡ ንክሰርሕ እቲ ሓደ እቲ ካሊእ ግን ሰላም ዘይደሊ ዘሎ ካነየ መብዛሕትኡ ሓፈሻዊ ንሕና ሕግደፍ ኢና ንብሎም ንስኻ ከምኡ ይበልካ ንሕና ግን ከምኡ ኢና ንብሎም ስለዚ ምሳቶም ፀገም ከይኸውን ባይ ዘ ወይ ፐርሰናሊ ኣነ ኣብ ደንቨር ምስ ክልተ ናይ ኢሳያስ ደገፍቲ ኮይኖም ያው ሕግደፍ እዮም ተፋሊጠ ብዙሕ ዲስከሽን ወሲድና ግን መጨረሻው ናይ ተጋሩ ተወሰኑ crazy ሃይሎም እዮም ክወዕኻ የሚሎም እዮም ክቀትልኻ የሚሎም እዮም ግን I think we are in a society that we believe to an extent there's justice, there is law and order. So ኣብዛ ዓዲ I mean unless to serve ፀገመሊ ወንበር mostly ሰላም ኢልካ ተራዲኻ ወይ ክትፈትሕ ኢኻ ወይ ኢግኖር ጌርካ move on ክትገብር ኢኻ so ትዝበልካዮ ትቐንዲ ግን ናይ ቱርኪ ኢራን ቻይና United Arab Emirates ንስኻ ዘይበልካዮ ኣነ ዝሓውሰሉ ከኣን እስራኤል ንባዕላ ብሴኩሪቲ ብድሕነት ውሽጣውሽጢ ንኢትዮጵያ ሒዝም ትሕግዘላ እያ so for the first time ኣብ ታሪክ ክልተ ሃገር ዓይኒ ንዓይኒ ዘይረኣያ ኢራን እና እስራኤል ብሓደ ኮይነን ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ እናሰርሓ ኣሜሪካ ግን ነዚ ነገር እዚ መልሲ ኣይተወልድ ዘላ so ትፀገም ኣነ መብዛሕትና ማለት እዩ ኣሜሪካውያን ኮይና ዘይግነትና መንግስትና ንብሎ ናይ ኣሜሪካ መንግስቲ responsibility obligation ከይወስድ ንሕና ሸላልታ ጌርና ሰላማዊ ሰልፊ advocacy diplomacy ዝሕልና ኢና ዘለና this is ናተ ተወሳኺ ሓሳብ እቲ ዝወልካዮ ግን I think ፍትሓዊ ንክንገብር ተኮይና ከምዚ ኣሜሪካውያን ዝብልዎ ወይ ድማ ናይ culture ናይ western language we have to sometimes swallow the bigger pill to get through where we need to be. You know, even if Eritreans and Tigrayans like stand side by side and defeat whatever enemy that we want to call, there's always going to be some other dispute. There's always going to be an issue. But how long are we going to just keep having this kind of 20, 30 year later war?
Yeah, Nikki,
fighting?
that's what I'm saying. We need to gravitate virtues. We need to gravitate towards the virtues of understanding. Virtues is the hardest thing to do. You see what I mean? But when we gravitate towards the virtue of respect, the virtue of solving, okay, the virtue of standing against the injustice the minute it happens, and rather than just waiting because it's not happening to you. So if you see a group of Muslims being arrested in a region, you should be advocating right away for that, saying that shouldn't be happening. And so in Africa, typically when something bad is happening, everybody stays quiet until it escalates. Haji, the principle, the virtue of standing up for injustice the minute it happens, that's a virtue that would solve the problem overnight. The virtue of respecting human rights would change the game overnight in that whole region. So that's what I'm saying. That's what we need to gravitate towards, is what I'm saying.
And I would let Sagush jump in, but I also want to mention, I think it's fine. We can continue in English to simplify things. Is that
No, but you're gonna cut to
na America Mengesti, so if that's okay. Now Eastern Europe, ወታደር ይልካሉ ራሽያ ዩክሬን አታክ ይትገብር that's ኣብዚ ሕዚ ብዙሕ ድምፂ ዝገብር ዘሎ ኣሜሪካ ራሽያ ዩክሬን ከይትወቅዕ ዝብል ዘሎ it's ብጣዕሚ ኣነ ንዓይ ዘሕዝነንን ዘናደንን እዩ እዚዩ ሓደ እዚ ሓደ ኒ ካልኣይ ናይ ዩናይትድ አረብ ኤምሬት ህድሱ ናይ የመን ስለ ዝወቅዕዋ ዘለው ብድሮን አንታይ ድሮን ሚሳይል እና ጀት ፋይተር ጀትስ ናብ ኤምሬት ትሰድደላ ኣሜሪካ ሒዛ ኣብ ሰዓት እዚ imagine ኤምሬት ጋን like it's the United Arab Emirates that committed genocide in Tigray along with Turkey and the other nations that we talked about. Let's just put it that way, okay? So while they committed genocide in Tigray, the U.S. will not dare to call that out. But when Emirates signed a deal with France for 19 plus billion military equipments, the U.S. that was withholding the 50 F-35 fighter jets, 18 highly sophisticated drones worth over 20 billion US dollars that was put on hold. They turn around, they say like, Emirates, that's okay. You can just go ahead and we'll let you buy and take all this stuff. I mean, this is the kind of thing the United States of America is doing as we speak, yet we don't even acknowledge the fact that our government here in this country that we're supposed to be having our voices to our people back home is supplying some of these countries who are using the weapon that is either sold by the United States government or assist to those countries that are turning around using those weapons to kill our people in Tigray. And of course, in other countries in Africa, what's happening is that when we look at the weapon, the history was France, UK, and other countries. But in Tigray, what I don't understand is for 15 months, the world is watched, corridors shut off, people literally dying. And America is so worried right now, Russia invading Ukraine, because the possibility of happening versus people that are dying, my people in Tigray, they're just ignored by the United States government. Anyway, that's just my thought. I know Sagush, you haven't spoken, so if you want to throw a thought in there, you're welcome to do so. Tigrinya ሆነ በእንግሊዝኛ doesn't matter at this point.
So what was your question again?
It's a thought that I was just saying. That was like in response to what you were saying.
So yeah, I think we need what is happening is clear that they don't want to help they don't want to help the people of Tigray because I think their reason is they don't want to have 120 million people migrated to Europe, and they know the intention of the Tigray, we don't have any intention to hold the power in Addis Ababa, and they know that if we remove Abiy and we left Addis Ababa vacuum and we go to Makala, and they know that the civil war will go even more worse between the Amhara and the Oromo, which is obvious. But the thing is, whether they scare this or not, will happen. They just want to kill. It may kill more people, but it will happen. The reason why it will happen is the Ethiopian economy is going down. The more the Ethiopian economy going down, and the freedom fighters will get power, which is the Oromo and the Tigray will get power. So I think I don't know how do you talk to them, but they should help the country in a way that remove Abiy and reconcile it and come to the table, discuss every ethnic like a stakeholder about Ethiopia, and decide what they want. That's the only solution for people who will not migrate. But how do you tell them this? How do you convince them this is the only solution?
Well, I think the bigger challenge though is to bring. I mean, it's a great idea, but to bring people to the table and to have a discussion is that you have such a divided Ethiopians. 120 million people. Yet, even within, when you split them into the regions, right? The 9 different groups that were formed in Washington D.C. on November 4th, 2021, last year, at the 1-year anniversary of the Tigray genocide. Some of them were rejected right away, saying they do not represent the people on the ground. So, for example, the Oromo representative that signed the deal, they were rejected by the Oromo fighters because they say that some of those people were oppressing them and that they have blood on their hand. Therefore, they can't really be a representation. So I think it's like that, at this point, honestly, as much as we wanted to see the sit down discussion around tables in Ethiopia, I don't foresee that happening as long as FANA, the Amhara militia, the Amhara regional military, and the Hegdef are continuously joining military and occupying, Western Tigray. So there's, to an extent, there is still the military continuous process in which, civilians along the way are going to continue to die, whether it be in the midst of war or continues the lack of medicine and food. So this dynamic, I think, the U.S., there's so many things the U.S. can do. I don't think, I would love to see that happen, what you suggested, but I don't think the U.S. or other foreign powers is going to come in and say, we don't like Abiy Ahmed, let's just remove him. We don't like, I just heard a couple of days ago that the U.S. is really irritated at Isaias Afwerki and is hoping ways and means to really get rid of it, get rid of him. But that's not really going to happen either, because the U.S. can't just go and topple like a government, even when they're dictated like the North Koreans and Eritrea, for that matter. Isaias Afwerki has been at it for 30 years. And the U.S. would only go when they see there's heavy interest that benefits the U.S. That's why I brought up the Ukraine situation, because I sense that the U.S. wants to continue to sell like hardware, military weapons to Ukraine, but also the U.S. wants Ukraine to possibly join NATO in the future. You have a NATO country, Turkey. Jonas, let's talk about for a sec. A NATO country, Turkey, member of NATO, using NATO hardware and military weapons, committing genocide in Tigray. And this is not the first time Turkey is committing genocide, the first time in Tigray, but Turkey has committed genocide in other countries, and we don't even talk about that.
Yeah, so with Turkey, the president's son is the one who was a MIT graduate, and his company is the one who's creating the drones. So that's their business venture. And so because they're doing that, they're selling the drones in Ethiopia, in different parts of Africa, and so forth. So the main thing is to get anti-drone weapons. That's to be the main thing. But what America can do, if they want to resolve their issue and if they care about their interest, because they technically want Ethiopia to stay together. But if they want to end this war, and they keep, they do a lot of, the lip service, and they did do the sanction though. And, that's a big deal. And then also they did the trade sanction on Eritrea and PFDJ, EDF, and then for Ethiopia they took away the AGAL, the economic treaty, or the economic treaty. So by them taking away AGAL, what that does is that creates more, stress on the government of Abiy, right? Prosperity Party. And so that means he doesn't have money to fuel the war, but he's given money from other sources, right? Arab Emirates and so forth. So what can America do? America can work with those other 6 countries, right? And create deals with them to end this as well. Right now, there's a war that's about to happen, or might not happen, or may happen in Ukraine. Who does that affect? That affects Turkey for sure, but I think that's about it from those countries that are affecting Tigray. So they sanctioned China, a drone company in China, for genocide, human rights activities that's happening in China, right? So the reality is they can do something. Right. Oh, also Russia is affected by the Ukraine war too. So that's out of the 6 countries that's in Tigray, right? 2 of them are affected by the Ukraine war. So the reason I'm saying this is everything's interconnected. So when we're being advocates, we need to advocate and find a way to be able to communicate in terms of interest. What's in America's interest, and at the same time, what's in the people of Tigray's interest to end this war. And at the end of the day, when the war ends, more trade relations could happen, right? But with a war, you can't have any trade relations. No one's winning. People are dying. So we have to support the people, and that will be able to support the trade interests. If you're wondering why Israel's popping in out of nowhere, is because of some kind of either security interest or trade interest. They don't want Iran to be part of Abiy administration. They don't want UAE, or maybe UAE is okay because they're a part of the Abraham Accord, but they don't want Iran for sure. You see what I'm saying? So everybody is scared of each other. And so what the thing is, we got to, as a diaspora, we got to find out what the fear is and what the interest is, so that way we can solve the problem. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No. And, and I appreciate you brought that up. I talked about it yesterday too, the sanction on Eritrea's General Philippos Walde Yohannes. And I think he had a company, if I'm not mistaken, he used to run, that operated, I believe, internationally, and it brought in most of the currency into the country. And recently, it is showing that it's crippling Isaias Afwerki's ability to really have the hard currency that he needs to do certain things that he was able to do. And it's also, we should note that roughly about 1 billion, that's with the B, US dollar worth of support has been given by Abiy Ahmed to Isaias Afwerki. And that was to help the war in Tigray, which is a disaster and the most failure planning that the two evil have done, together. I think we should also remember that Ukraine actually at one point was selling military hardwares to Ethiopia. And so these are the things that, when we are talking about advocating, and about 3 months ago, maybe less, we had a meeting with Congressman Brad Sherman of California, and he's asked us to give him a list of the countries that are either supporting directly, indirectly, financially, and military weapons that's been sold. And he was shocked when we were able to, we meaning the Tigrayan diaspora, we have very sharp folks in California that has been working at it, and they were able to present him with evidence. When we brought the issue of Israel working behind closed doors with Ethiopia, Ukraine, while Russia is possibly in the verge of attacking it, it was still selling weapons to Ethiopia, light hardwares to Ethiopia. So perhaps you've seen some of the weapons, the modernized weapon that are an AK-47 versus similar to M16s and AR-15 style weapons that TDF is now possess. A lot of this weapon that actually was shifted from the United States to most of Eastern Europe. One of them happens to be Ukraine. Those have actually been the lighter weapons being sold to Ethiopia and utilized for the war. In the process, they've been captured. So when you put together all the pieces, that if Russia actually attacks Ukraine, Ukraine will not have the ability to sell weapons. I mean, they're not doing it right now, but they did it for an extended period of time. And when we start criticizing it, they hushed it down. They squashed it actually very quickly, which was good. But the rest of the other countries, Iran and Israel, which we talked about this over and over, like on the show and other times, they're not working together, but by working in Ethiopia in their own field. That's just what you say. Now, Turkey, what's really, really interesting is Turkey actually is using its people on the ground to operate those drones, the TB2 drones, which is, obviously one of the most highly sophisticated drone, because it's using cameras sold by Canada. So it has a high infrared, and there's also a certain software sold from the U.S., certain hardware and software U.S., France, Germany, and Canada. These are the 4 countries that I believe, is it his son-in-law to the Turkish president, or son-in-law. So the company that runs the drone business is like family tied. And Canada, I thought was going to like ban the sale of their high infrared camera to that country, but I'm yet to see that publicly. I've heard about it that they were going to do it. I don't know if they officially done it or not. I just have not heard it from the Canadian government.
Mm-hmm.
So when we put all this together, why is it that a lighter skin or white European are more valuable to be protected by NATO, led by America, but when it comes to lives in Tigray, they seem not to matter much to America? Because the U.S., I agree with you, Jonas, sanctioning the Eritrean leader is put an impact in Eritrea. However, why is it that they couldn't sanction Ethiopian military generals, Abiy Ahmed? Simply, if they, rather than crippling the leadership within Ethiopia and Eritrea, I guarantee you, they will come to their knees and they will negotiate at heartbeat, because the moment they know that you can't have drones, you can't have weapons from outside, coming into Ethiopia and Eritrea, they know the ability of TDF, what they're capable of doing, and they both do not want to go down. So they would actually sit down and negotiate with no time. So why aren't we actually fighting for these kind of, specific things by saying, let's put, military sanctions on both Eritrea and Ethiopia, stop the military weapons coming from outside, including the drones, and then see what happens. And then if TDF is saying, well, we're going to fight now because you put sanction on them, I think there's ways and means to keep this, to bring this into an end. But America really has to step up.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I'm with you 100%. That would end the game right away. If there's no drones and there's a complete weapon embargo, that would literally end the frustration overnight. So we just have to keep advocating. I think going after one country at a time is a step forward, but I think ultimately arms embargo is the best sanction that could happen to the Ethiopian government.
Go ahead, Zagai. I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think he just mentioned, yeah, if there's sanction over weapon exporting, and especially if they hold diplomatically the UAE and the Turkish and the other countries, uh, the neighbor countries, they will frustrate, and they will quickly come to the table or leave the Western Tigray and refuse the table. Whatever they choose, they can do. But they may not be facing in front of the TDF because, like the generals, they've been saying, if you keep holding Homara, Western Tigray, um, you don't expect them. You may not expect them. They come to you over there. uh, they may come to, in a way, it could be in Asmara, it could be in Gondar, Bahardar, or something, because we don't have fighter jets, we do not have drones, we may not fight in the flat land, Western Tigray. So if those enemy, they know that they cannot get drone, they cannot get any supply, and they know that, and they may just stop the war, quit the war, and leave the Western Tigray without doing anything.
100%.
Yeah.
True. Well, I know that we've been at it for a little bit now, so we mixed it out with Little Tigrayna. Jonas, I know it was like last minute things, but I guess before we close our segment, is that this is kind of one of those things. Like I want us to give it a try. Um, I'm optimistic. I think I'm impressed with you to have a young diaspora of Eritrean descent of American who is able. You saw me a few times when I just kind of got like upset, or I guess, or whatever, emotional in the chat with a couple of people that I had to, yeah. What I appreciate is, that we can come together and have grace. I think earlier you used the word grace, and understanding and having grace of a person who is in pain. And I think, for the past 15 months, for Tagaro, it's been beyond words that I cannot describe. How it feels to just see the horrific videos, and then other human beings will say like, "Oh, that's not really happening. Nobody's dying in Tigray." It's really, and we can go on and on, but let's save that for another time. And I know that I'm looking at some of my messages, and yes, Tagaro ሓትና ኣሕዋት ዓለም ሙሉ ዘለኹም እዚ ኣካይዳ እዚዩ ንሓደ ኩርየ ንሓደ ክሕጉስ ኣይኮነን። ህዝብና ይመውት ኣሎ፣ ፀገም እኒሄ። ንሕና ፅባሕ ንጎ ፈተና ፀላእና፣ ምስ ኤርትራውያን ተራዳዲእና ፍትሓዊ ዘለዎ መገዲ፣ ዋላ እቲ ዓባይ ትግራይ ዝበሃል እውን ናይ ኤርትራ መሬት ናይ ትግራይ መሬት ጎኒ ጎኒ ኮንካ ወድዩ ብሓደ ኮንካ ዋላ ንድሕር ትነብር ኮንካ ስቲል ብሓይሊ ብቅልፅም ዝበሃል ልምት ኣለዎ እዩ። ህዝቢ ብሞት ኣብ ቃልስን ኣብ ጥሜትን ኣብ መከራን እናሞተ ክነብር ክንቅበሎ የብልናን። እዚ እቲ ሓሳብ ዘምፃናዮ ዮናስ ሓፈሻዊ ብሶሻል ሚድያታት ምሳና ብዙሕ ነገር ፋይት ክገብር ስለ ዝረእኽዎ ያው ካብቲ ግሩፕ ሰለክቲቭሊ ገይረ ሪቻውት ገይረ ማለት እዩ። ኣብ ቀፃሊ ግን ብደንቢ ጌርና ኣብ ዊክን ክኾን እንተሎ ሳተርደይ ወይ ድማ ሳንደይ ፕሮግራም ሒዝና ሓፈሻዊ ብግዜ እንተይመሰየ እንተሎ ድምፂ ክነስምዕ ክንቃለስ ክንምኩር ኢና። ካልኦት እውን ያንግ ዝኾኑ ብእንግሊዝኛ ፕሮግራም እውን ሆፕፉሊ ኣብ ወርሒ ሓደ ግዜ ድዩ ኣብ ሰሙን ሓደ ግዜ ድዩ ዲስከስ እናገበርና ሕፅር እናበልና discussion ክንፈጥር እዩ ተስፋ ናተይ። I hope Jonas, I can extend an invitation that's more timed and planned ahead of time, that we can actually bring awareness to people, so we don't have to hold you like late night like this, and then we're just also, it's just we try to shuffle things how to figure out and whatnot, what kind of discussion we need to have. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you. I appreciate your time. I know for a guy, it's extra late night for his time zone. So thank you for staying up and for coming on and having a thought in this discussion. And I hope that our people would eventually have access to food and medicine, and that there will be a day we can go back and look at this and say, oh, you know what? We did have a conversation, even when it was hard. We were able to put up with each other. We were able to actually educate each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Sagai.
Go ahead, Enos.
Okay. No, what I was going to say was thanks for inviting me, Mickey. I'm glad I was able to come and speak a little bit on it. And then I'll love to come again on another day. And then we can do a pre-planned and everything. The main thing the message I want to leave with is basically saying for people to understand that Team Freedom is definitely trying to be a bridge to everything that's going on, even Gloria Akal, all the activism groups. They recognize the struggle and the pain that Tagaru is going through. At the same time, they're advocating for the end of the war. And my biggest thing the way to end the war is you have to end the money, the thing that's fueling the war. So if it's countries that's fueling the war, then those are the countries we have to focus on to get them to stop. And then when the TDF becomes gets all the aggressors out of their region, out of their country, and so forth, and has food and aid coming in, and that's a victory right there. And then accountability is going to take a step-by-step process, but accountability has to happen. And then ultimately, truth and reconciliation is going to be the next step, because we have to learn how to live amongst each other. As a diaspora, we have an advantage. We have an advantage because we have the technology, we have the understanding, we have the education, and we don't have bullets being shot at us. So with that, we have to use our advantage to create an understanding so we can be an example of the people and start the healing process now. But we have to work together to end the war, and our enemy is always going to be injustice. That's never going to change. Enemy is always going to be injustice. Whoever's doing it is the enemy. So injustice is the enemy. That's what I want to leave with, Mickey. Thank you, man.
Appreciate Thank you. And Sagai, if you want to take a minute, otherwise we're going to end our segment. Thank you, both of you guys.
Thank you, Mickey, for inviting me. Thank you, Jonas, for meeting you and for coming and for your share of your thought. Let's get together. Let's discuss together. Let's close the gap and then let's step by step solve things. Cannot be everything in one time, and we need to track what we achieve, what we need next. So we have to go planned. We cannot just go like randomly. We have to go planned and track what we have achieved and plan what is next. And so based off that, we can make it shorter. And as Jonas have said, cut off the weapons, all that, but all by plan. Who do you target first? Iran, Israel, or and what do you achieve today? What do you try to achieve tomorrow? So let's do this and let's get together. This is about humanity. It's not about Tagaro. It's not about Eritrean. It's about human suffer. So let's focus on this and let's be the voice of our people. And thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Absolutely, I agree. Let's be the voice for the people. And I cannot, go without saying that the 95,000 Eritreans that were housed in the refugee camps in Tigray, we still don't know what happened to them. So they are among the victims of the millions of Tagaro that I talked, been displaced internally, and nearly 80,000 in Sudan, and the list goes on and on. But I absolutely agree with both of you. Thank you, Sagai, bringing in the fact that this is about humanity. So let's have human heart. Let's stand together against atrocities, against genocide, and let's our people have food and medicine and lasting peace.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, guys.